Good afternoon. Energy is the one thing we all depend on and almost nobody thinks about until it breaks or until the bill arrives looking like a ransom note. 100 years ago, electricity was a luxury. Heating was local. Mobility was mechanical. If you wanted storage, you stacked coal, wood, or food. Today, we're told we are standing on the edge of a historic leap. Centralized systems replaced by decentralized ones. Producers and consumers replaced by prosumers. Fossil fuels replaced by renewables. And by 2050, some politicians talk as if the planet will politely run on sunshine and good intentions. So let's do something radical. Let's separate the story from the machinery. First, demand. Everyone loves to argue about supply, but demand is the silent dictator. There is still energy poverty on a scale that should embarrass the entire human species. Roughly 666 million people still have no access to electricity at all, and more than 1 billion still lack access to clean cooking fuels. That's not a climate debate. That's a development crisis. People don't choose between wind and gas. They choose between light and darkness, between clean air and smoke in their lungs. Now add the second demand engine, the modern rich world electrifying everything while pretending it's free. Vehicles are moving toward electrification. Heating is shifting toward electric systems. And the new monster in the basement is data. Data centers are not a cute tech detail. They're industrial-scale electricity eaters, and they don't negotiate. They just demand uptime every second, like a spoiled child with a credit card. So the first answer is boring but important. Overall consumption is likely to rise, and it will rise differently by region. Developing economies are trying to climb out of poverty. Developed economies are building digital-heavy industry and electrifying lifestyles. Now, supply. Here's where the religion starts. For a while, the dominant story was simple. Renewables will replace everything, and fossil fuels will disappear, like VHS tapes. That end of history, energy narrative, is now quietly dying, because reality has this nasty habit of showing up with spreadsheets and winter weather. What seems more likely is a mixed system that gets more complex, not less. Solar and wind will grow. Nuclear will be back in the conversation because stable baseload is not a moral issue, it's a physics issue. Gas will remain relevant because it's flexible and dispatchable. Coal will not vanish overnight either, especially where it's cheap, domestic, and politically protected. Even when countries phase out coal, some of them simply replace old plants with newer, more efficient ones. That's not virtue, that's industrial survival. And yes, China matters. China isn't just installing renewables. China is building supply chains, manufacturing capacity, grid infrastructure, and industrial policy around the whole thing. That's why China can shape the energy transition even without preaching about it. It's doing the unglamorous work: factories, minerals, logistics, and scale. Now, the big claim you hear from the pro-renewable camp is speed and cost. The argument goes like this: solar and wind are already cheaper per kilowatt hour, and they can be deployed faster than traditional projects. That speed matters even more now because money is expensive. Higher interest rates punish long projects. Fast build projects win, even if they aren't perfect, and there's truth in that. But here's the trap. Cost per kilowatt hour is a headline metric. Systems don't run on headlines. Systems run on reliability. This is where storage becomes the real battlefield. A coal pile is storage. A gas pipeline plus underground storage is storage. A nuclear plant has fuel cycles and planning and stability. With wind and solar, the generation curve is not obedient. It follows weather and daylight, not your dinner schedule. So the moment you push renewables to a large share of the grid, you face the same question every operator asks and every politician avoids. Where is the energy when the wind stops and the sun disappears behind clouds, or simply sets? There are only a few answers, and all of them have costs. One answer is pumped hydro, where geography allows it. Another is batteries, which have gotten dramatically cheaper in recent years. A figure you hear often now is around $100 per kilowatt hour for lithium-ion battery cells or systems in some markets, down from the old world of 4-digit prices. That changes the economics of peak shaving and grid balancing. In some regions, it can be cheaper to build storage than to build new peak generation. And then there's hydrogen, the evergreen fantasy. Hydrogen is not magic, it's an energy carrier. You make it by spending energy, and then you lose more energy converting it back. That is the price of chemistry. Hydrogen can be useful in industry, in some heavy transport, and as a storage option where nothing else works. But if someone sells it to you as an easy, universal solution, they're selling a story, not a system. This brings us to the part everyone pretends to hate but secretly loves: subsidies and politics. People argue about whether renewables need subsidies. Then they forget that fossil fuels and legacy systems have had decades of tax policy, infrastructure socialization, preferential access, and strategic protection. Sometimes a subsidy is a direct payment. Sometimes it's a tax break. Sometimes it's a government absorbing the real risk. Sometimes it's the grid itself being paid by the public while private actors collect the profit. So the honest question is not who gets subsidies, because everyone does, one way or another. The honest question is who pays for the transition's hidden costs? Because the transition is not just new generation. It's also grid expansion and reinforcement, control systems, balancing resources, storage, and the hard part nobody wants to fund: resilience. This is where the decentralized utopia meets its first wall. Yes, prosumers exist. Rooftop solar is real. Home batteries are becoming real. Microgrids are real in remote areas and for critical infrastructure. But the modern economy still needs a backbone grid. A hospital cannot run on vibes. A port cannot run on a neighborhood solar co-op. A data center cannot run on maybe today is sunny. So decentralization will happen, but it will not abolish centralization. It will layer on top of it, like every other technology wave. Narrative: we will replace centralized fossil systems with clean, decentralized renewables, and everyone wins. Reality: we will build a more complex hybrid system, and the bill will be fought over like territory. Now let's talk winners and losers, because that's the real engine of policy. Who profits? The manufacturers of generation equipment and storage systems, the owners of grid infrastructure and flexibility assets, the countries that control critical minerals and processing capacity, the regions with stable policy, fast permitting, and cheap capital. Who pays? Consumers, if costs are socialized through tariffs and taxes. Industry, if electricity prices rise and competitiveness drops. Governments, if they choose to subsidize stability while privatizing returns. And geopolitics sits right in the middle. Energy is security. The shale revolution in the United States, for example, didn't just change fuel supply. It changed foreign policy behavior by shifting dependence. Europe's energy debates are not just about carbon. They're about dependency, price exposure, and industrial survival. China's renewables dominance is not just green leadership. It's industrial strategy. So what might 2050 look like? Not a single utopia. Not a single collapse either. More likely, a higher share of renewables where grids are strong and investment is disciplined. A return of nuclear, where states decide reliability is worth the politics. Gas remaining as a flexible stabilizer in many regions, and oil facing the biggest long-term risk in transport, especially if electrification keeps spreading and battery supply chains stay resilient. But the biggest shift will be psychological. Energy will stop being cheap and invisible. It will be openly political, openly strategic, and openly contested. The countries that win will be the ones that treat energy as infrastructure and security, not as a PR campaign. 3 questions for you, because you are the ones paying for this, whether you like it or not. First, have your electricity and heating costs gone up over the last 2 years or down? Not theory, your real bill. Second, if you were running a hospital, a port, or a shipyard, would you bet your reliability on weather-dependent power without serious storage and backup? Third, who should pay for the grid upgrades that make this transition possible? The new mega consumers like data centers and electrified industry, or the public through general tariffs? Here's the conclusion, clean and simple. Energy transition is real, but it's not a fairy tale. Renewables are winning on economics in many cases, but systems still obey physics. And the real fight is not green versus fossil. It's who controls the infrastructure and who gets stuck with the bill. Next episode, I'll go straight at the most abused word in modern energy talk: hydrogen. What it's actually good for, and what it's being used to distract you from. That's all.